we've heard this morning with a number of fantastic talks about the possibilities and the challenges that face us as AI develops autonomous capabilities. And I'm about to present, on behalf of the group, some of the approach that we can take to try to address these challenges, because as John said, we're in the governance phase now, and as was just said, we're in the ethical phase now. So how is it that we can develop frameworks that might be practical to be able to address these challenges? I'm going to give a very, very brief detour, though, to talk about the human brain, because it's going to be the human brain and the human mind that will help us to face the challenges that Max articulated. Hippocrates here amazingly talks about the human brain, and that even in those days, there was a realization that that is the organ of consciousness, that is the organ of mental illness, of mental health. What we're realizing more and more is that there are circuits that underlie all of these functions. And I think the key distinction that's to be made in this context this morning is the distinction is talking about consciousness and awareness as sentient beings, subjects of experience, and then whether that's something that AI can achieve, and also what it means for us as autonomous agents when AI, if AI achieves it, and then volition and agency and our ability as autonomous beings to have rights, to have responsibilities. Next slide. Our brain has chemistry, our brain has temporal dynamics and mechanisms, and what's happening with AI now is that, and machine learning and deep thinking and so forth, is that with different sorts of setups, with different sorts of networks, that these emergent properties are emerging. And as we've heard, we're going to be faced with the consequences soon. Next. We can right now measure the temporal dynamics of the brain and use AI to crunch the numbers and feed back into the human brain signals that are based upon the information that's obtained from the human brain. So we're already in an era of the brain-computer interface. And I co-chaired a session downtown in the last couple of days on neuroscience and AI. And the issues that will abound are really science fiction issues, but the point is they become rather quickly ethical issues. Next slide. We can actually model and simulate the brain activity. Next slide. And this is the final slide before then I go on to talk about the AIWS. And I love this slide. What do you think this slide, what's the message of this slide? Just take a look. I think it's sort of self-explanatory. What is this slide pointing out?
We're all dogs.
Well, yeah. I mean, on the left is the limbic system and the paralimbic belt, which are the more primitive, evolutionarily older, emotional and attentional areas of the brain. And you see how conserved they are across evolution. But on the right, you see the prefrontal cortex that's shaded, and you see how even compared to chimpanzees, there's a tremendous expansion of the human prefrontal cortex. And that's where goals and values, that's where pro-social as opposed to anti-social, higher order processing takes place. And really what we're talking about at the end of the day is whether the prefrontal cortex wins or the limbic system wins. That's an oversimplification, but it's incumbent upon us to be able to address these issues And that's why, from my vantage point, as a brain scientist, neurologist, and psychiatrist, and my colleague Sarah Cotterill, who is a social psychologist, as was said, we need to be able to guide or at least inform these sorts of discussions with a sense of how we go from the human brain mind and social context to being able to incorporate these increasingly autonomous beings, perhaps, or entities in a way that's going to be pro-social rather than antisocial. So if I could have the next slides. And what I'm going to do is, on behalf of the group, this is really a group effort, and of course, Tuan is the origin behind it, and this is a document that's been vetted by a number of the people on the board of the Boston Global Forum. But I'm going to take you very briefly through essentially a layered model. And what Max is talking about with his Institute for the Future of Life is how scientists need to come together and regulate themselves. Urs Gasser and others, he's at Harvard Law School, in November published in IEEE a multi-layered model for ethics of AI. And we adopted the model because it addresses sort of this next step of things that need to be done for governments, for industry, for society, and has layers, higher order layers of values and ethics, mid layers of regulation and rules and norms, and then lower layers where the rubber meets the road of this sort of technology and practice and application. And so the AI World Society of the Boston Global Forum and the Dukakis Institute really aims to be able to be a voice and a convener as we are today. And after I briefly present some of these principles, the point is to hear from you and to have a discussion as to whether they seem like they're on the right track and how to refine them and apply them so that they can be presented in the larger context. Next slide. I don't think I need to go into this, but it has to do with the global citizenship and next generation democracy. Next. And here we are. Should be layer 1. Can we go up a little bit? Interesting. No, layer 1 seems to be, yeah, layer 1 is interestingly missing. And so it's always good to have some old-fashioned, non-digital things around.
Now we know what technology objects to in your friend.
Well, yes, absolutely. Maybe it doesn't want oversight. So, so layer 1 is the charters and principles to create a society of AI for a better world to ensure peace, security, and prosperity. And AI society, there's the concept of AI objects, which need to act potentially like AI citizens. And what might that mean? And how can we sync human values and rules of society and standards with AI? That's what level 1 or layer 1 is about. And it talks about AI citizens not threatening or putting at risk the health, safety, dignity, and freedom of any human, cannot take actions which violate norms and laws, must be sufficiently transparent so that it can be interacted with and understood, and sufficiently auditable and subject to regular audits without being overly constraining or controlling, so that there is this pro-social or ethical guidance rather than the opposite. Layer 2 is the ethical framework and guidelines for the role of AI in building next generation democracies, which are under threat now, and the notion of being people-centric, a rearticulation of individuals, groups, and governments that need to be using this for the promotion of tolerance. Layer 3, and that's based upon UNESCO and UN guidelines, and it needs to be consonant with those. Layer 3 is standards for management of AI resources and development, and there will be a practice committee that can develop and manage and promote standards that would be requisite or would be advisable, and that's something that the Boston Global Forum and the Michael Dukakis Institute will constitute. And again, we are just a single player, if you will, in a situation where there are multiple stakeholders, but within the context of our role and our platform, the hope is to be able to be of help. Next. Layer 4, it has to do with laws and legislation. Again, we are not going to be creating those, but we will do things that promote discussion and enable the development of legislation nationally and internationally. The notion is, as was talked about earlier, that there need to be treaties and conventions. Already this is starting, and so we want to be in a position to facilitate that and to be a catalyst for that. Next. This gets to those issues and fleshes them out a little bit more. And finally, or penultimately, I should say, next. The whole issue of then how one can integrate that into policy making nationally, locally, nationally, and internationally to be able to generate smart and humanitarian decision making. And finally, you know, as was alluded to a moment ago, we want to make sure that the people who are driving the ship are not the people with the monetary incentive or the people who are bad actors. And I think one of the challenges that we're going to face is, even if we are successful at creating the broader discussion and framework and infrastructure, there are always going to be a subset of bad actors who will use this for ill. And I think we would be naive to think that we don't also have to address that, and how, as an international community, we deal with that either through prevention, deterrence, response, in addition to all the lofty things that we're trying to do to get most of the population, most of the time, and certainly the developers of these technologies on the pro-social side of human nature and the mind brain in the future. So with that, Tuan, we can have our distinguished guests also speak.